Welcome to Mac Talk, a Middle Tennessee podcast from Mott Haven Arts and Cultural Center in Hendersonville, Tennessee. I'm your announcer, Kennedy Galpin. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at the Park West Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to making the arts available to everyone.
Thank you, Kennedy, and welcome everyone to Mac Talk. I'm your host, John Pitcher. We like to think of the Mac as a cultural town square where we encourage everyone to be their creative best. So, Kennedy, what have you been up to?
So recently I made the fun purchase of buying an iPod Classic because I realized I have all of these CDs at my house from either childhood, teenagedom, I guess, and adulthood, I guess, that I keep on collecting. Don't really have I have a CD player, but I realized if I get an iPod, I can just bring those CDs with me everywhere.
And it's just all portable, a little library.
Yeah, exactly. And I had like the Nano growing up, but that was only like 1 gigabyte.
Okay.
So I had to get one with 160 gigabytes.
Okay, so what is on your playlist?
So recently it's been a lot of Paramore. I found Oingo Boingo on CD recently. Some Metallica. I found a lot of those CDs. Pink Floyd. Iron Maiden, a little bit of everything, honestly.
A little bit of everything?
A little bit of everything.
Now, I think you had mentioned to me, I think I had taken a glance at it at one point, and you've got some oldies and classics on there, too. You've got some Fleetwood Mac.
Fleetwood Mac,
Yeah.
Elvis Costello.
Elvis Costello. When you listen to your music, do you shuffle it? How do you do it?
Oh, yeah, I shuffle everything.
That's
the joy of it.
Yeah. So it's like there's just the spontaneity.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of skipping.
It's improvising as you go.
It's a lot of skipping.
So you don't like
say,
I want to listen to this or I want to listen to that.
I do a little bit of that, but part of the fun of it is shuffling.
Okay.
Been listening to the Black Album from Metallica a lot on it too.
I just kind of like to think of you doing your drawings while listening to the heavy metal just banging in your ear.
It's true. It's very like that.
So I mean, I just can see. I guess if you're drawing a certain kind of superhero character, having Metallica in the background.
It does not matter what I'm drawing. I will probably still have heavy metal on it.
Okay. All right. So that's just the vibe.
It's just part of it.
That's just your vibe, right?
It's just part of it.
Okay. All right. Well, Kennedy, we have a great Picasso exhibit on display at Mott Haven right now. It's called The Unknown Picasso, and I'm happy to report that we've brought in a Picasso expert to talk with us about it. Dr. Charles Riley has a long track record in the international art world as a museum director, curator, journalist, author, and professor. He has curated exhibitions in Beijing, Taiwan, Berlin, Amsterdam, Lausanne, and New York, featuring works by Picasso, Modigliani, Matisse, Renoir, Turner, Cézanne, de Kooning, Stella Warhol, and Lichtenstein. In total, Dr. Riley has authored more than 40 books, including 4 books on Picasso. We're thrilled that he's here to talk to us about the Picasso exhibit that's on display at Mott Haven through November 9, 2025. Charles Riley, welcome to Mac Talk.
Thanks.
Well, we've got this amazing Picasso exhibit downstairs, and I just have to ask you, what is it about Picasso that has so captured the popular imagination?
Every time I would put a Picasso banner up in front of my museum in New York, the cars would come streaming in. It's just like candy. They just can't stay away from it. I think probably, as with Vincent van Gogh, as with Andy Warhol, it might be a little bit the biographical side. But my own take on this, and I hope we're really going to get into this, is he was just a master. He was the Leonardo da Vinci of the 20th century. There's an immensity to Picasso. So I know everybody wants to have the fun stories about Picasso and all the women, and then the suicide of his best friend. I know all those wonderful stories, and they're really cool. They're great. They're anecdotal, though. He is just a master. And when you get in front of these, and this is a beautiful show, it's got everything in it. When you get in front of these, you realize that you're in the presence of a singular talent.
Interesting. Well, when I think of Picasso and I think of just the aura of his name, I actually think of Albert Einstein.
Yeah.
And, the wonderful historian Paul Johnson has written this tome called Modern Times. And I think the first sentence in Modern Times is, the modern age began on May 29, 1919. And because the reason for that is that there was a solar eclipse that day. And the astronomers of the time, using the latest telescopes, were able to see that eclipse and see that the light was bending exactly the way Einstein had predicted in his general theory of relativity. And so at that moment, the wonderful, tidy world of Newtonian physics came to an end, and now we're still in this world of weirdness and strangeness and things that are not necessarily automatically intuitive. And I think Einstein, I don't think probably 99% of humanity has really read and understood Einstein's works, but they get that he represents modernity.
I love that comparison.
Thank you. I'm wondering if the same thing isn't true with Picasso, because he was just as much a revolutionary in his own way.
And from his mind, as with Einstein, I'm going back to that. I love your comparison. I absolutely think it's profound, because with Einstein, using math the way Picasso used drawing, Picasso was a really, really great draftsman. As you know, he could draw anything. By the way, like Leonardo, he could draw what we couldn't see. Einstein, using math, and not just a beautifully concise equation such as E = mc squared, but the real math that was behind it, had predicted what they saw with that eclipse. So he had said, I can tell you what you can't see right now, I can make it clear to you using math and also his words. I love Einstein's writings. And when side by side, it's not the first time anybody's made this comparison, by the way, in terms of cubism, when Picasso put multiple moments even in a still life or in a portrait on a surface, two-dimensional surface, but he depicted space and time in cubism. Einstein had also, as you well know, said, let's talk about the correlation of space and time using our imaginations. I think what you just done is made a wonderful connection for people to understand actually why this particular exhibition is so interesting, because this exhibition is Picasso thinking on paper, the way Einstein would think as well. And I'm going to add one more. I'm going to one-up you a little bit on this one, I think, because when you do what you're doing, this is like really turns me on to talk like this about the great minds of the 20th century, there was one other that we can compare with Picasso. Think of the portraits, especially the portraits, you have them in the show. There's a wonderful one. The woman is drawn almost with a spider web inside her body and inside her head. Her name was Dora Maar. She was a brilliant photographer, but a deeply troubled woman. And Picasso was getting inside her head, not depicting what you saw, but depicting what he knew was inside. Now, who else was doing that at the same time? Chap from Vienna named Sigmund Freud. Einstein, Freud, Picasso, three colossal minds of that period, cognizant of one another. Actually, Freud wrote very beautifully. Jung and Freud both wrote about Picasso. They say Picasso was cognizant of what Einstein was doing in terms of space and time relativity. In fact, Steve Martin did a play, Picasso and Einstein at the La Panagile. It's a wonderful play. So take those three minds and say, what did they do for humanity in a way? They gave us an imaginative way of thinking of things that could not be seen.
Mm-hmm. Right. And basically they changed the way we see the universe.
I think they did. Well done. I quite agree with you.
Among the three of them.
Oh, sure.
Well, let me talk about another aspect of Picasso that really blows my mind, and that's his productivity.
Yes.
If I understand correctly, he left behind more than 100,000.
More than 100,000. Nobody really knows.
Distinct works.
Yes.
Well, he lived to be 91.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So he was alive for about 33,215 days.
Good.
Which means that he was, and I'm assuming that when we're counting his distinct works, we're not counting the stuff he scribbled in the crib, that he was probably creating, 4 or 5 pieces a day or more.
Or more, right? When he got on a hot streak, it was so many per day that so many just went out without being signed. So many were just tucked into a drawer somewhere. Nobody has ever done what's called the catalogue raisonné, the authentic list, the inventory, if you want, of those things that are, this is by Picasso and we say so, because it's usually some bunch of scholars get together and say, this is the catalogue raisonné. A buddy of mine, his name is David Douglas Duncan, really great guy. When Picasso died in 1974, he was one of the ones who was brought in by the bank, actually, and by the estate to somehow inventory what was in those homes that he owned on the Côte d'Azur. And they opened the door of one. It was called La Californie, this mansion. It's actually where Marina Picasso lived. And there was just so much stuff. I don't want to use the word stuff because these are drawings, these are paintings, these are sculpture, these are little maquettes for sculpture. He said, Charlie, we were walking across drawings. We were trying not to step on them. The closets were full. We would open a door and there was more in there, and there was more, and there was more. And every day they would go back to the basement of a bank and try to say, okay, here's the inventory. Nobody's ever been able to do this. Why? Because he was so not just prolific, but he worked in, as you know, he worked in clay. He drew all the time. He painted all the time. Late in his life, and I'm an old man now, so I really relate to this part of it. Late in his life, he even stepped it up. Like in 1951, he knocked out these fantastic series of ink on paper that became etchings. It was he said to himself, "I'm writing a novel. I'm Cervantes. I'm going to spin out a whole bunch of tales on paper." And it was so many per day that it was almost like he was drawing and then dropping the sheet of paper on the floor.
Well, and I guess my layman's question is, how is that kind of productivity even possible? And is there any other precedent for that among artists? Because we've certainly had prolific artists, but
Andy
that's
Warhol.
almost
Yeah, right.
Well, of course, some of these guys might have factories, but
exactly.
This guy is almost manic. I mean, we maybe need Sigmund Freud to come in here to talk to us a little bit about what's going on here.
Or just remember, it was this tremendous facility. And I happen to know you know your music as well. So those artists, those pianists who could just improvise endlessly. Think of a Bach, right? Take the little theme, the Goldberg theme. Think of how simple that thing is. So 32 variations, but Bach, he probably in his time could have given you variations until you just said, hey, I think the keyboard's about to collapse. Mozart, Chopin, Liszt. They say that Liszt until 2 or 3 in the morning was improvising. We'll never know what that sounded like. But the one in the world of art, if I may, because Andy Warhol cheated. He just printed and printed and printed. He had a whole bunch of studio assistants. So that doesn't count. But Leonardo, think of a Leonardo notebook is called a codex, and there are codices. And these are literally thousands and thousands of sometimes tiny drawings, sometimes they're mathematical things, and it's writing as well. Because, by the way, while he was drawing, he was also writing. Picasso was a marvelous writer. I think there's your good comparison. Okay. That kind of endless, almost infinite stream of visual ideas that led Leonardo into those codices is very similar to this especially the black and white drawings of Picasso, where he just kept thinking on paper. When I play Bach, and when you played Bach, I'll bet you felt the same way. We're playing the preludes, we're playing the well-tempered clavier. We feel like we're thinking at the keyboard with Bach. We're watching him make those key changes. Philip Glass, too, by the way. When you play Glass, you say, okay, he's doing this, now he's going to do that. He could do this forever. He could keep doing this kind of, not just modulation, but this kind of rhythmic pattern. He could do these. Once you get the melody, you could do all kinds of things with it, as you know, in variations. Once Picasso basically got his vocabulary, he could just write the poetry forever.
Mm-hmm. We're speaking with the author Charles Riley, an internationally renowned expert on Picasso. We'll be back after this important message.
The Park West Foundation is a strong supporter of arts education. The arts foster creativity, critical thinking, and emotional expression. They also enhance communication skills and cultural awareness while boosting confidence and collaboration. Students engaged in the arts often perform better academically and develop lifelong appreciation for diverse perspectives. This message was brought to you by the Park West Foundation, a champion of arts awareness and education since 2006. For more information, visit their website at parkwestfoundation.org.
We're back with author and Picasso expert Charles Riley, who's here to talk with us about the Mac's current exhibit, The Unknown Picasso, which is on display through November 9, 2025. Well, I'd like to talk in a minute about the specific collection that's downstairs. It's the Marina Picasso collection. But first, I'd kind of like to maybe get a little bit more on Picasso the man and maybe Marina's relationship with her grandfather. We were talking a few weeks ago about this exhibit, and one of our board directors just sort of piped up. I mean, I don't know how serious she was, but she says, Picasso, he was kind of a pig, wasn't he?
Yeah, Picasso the Destroyer is
a pig. And
Picasso the pig, Picasso the dog.
And I was kind of thinking, well, didn't some of his family have the same feelings about him? And could you expound a little bit about this personality?
I am familiar with all these stories, and they are, as you know, Françoise Gillot, whom I knew actually. She came to my museum a couple of times. She wrote the one book that he didn't want to see published, which was a little bit about. I'd rather not use the word Picasso the pig, but Picasso actually it's Picasso the Destroyer is the way a lot of feminist biographers have written about him. And Marina has said on the record that she felt that it was cold to her. And I know the stories. I know why those stories, have been told, because he was, first of all, he was a philanderer, Picasso the philanderer. He was also, he could be very cruel. I think that he was tremendously upset whenever a woman would leave him, and that was the only one who really walked away. Françoise Gillot.
Right.
Yeah. No, Jacqueline was the last wife.
Okay.
Marie-Thérèse could never get over Picasso. She was the young one that he met in the Galerie Lafayette, or outside. Olga was the first wife, as you know, and she could never let go. Françoise Gillot was the only one who ever left him. Dora Maar was the weeping woman, right? And the weeping woman, that's usually everybody's good case for, if you want, Picasso the sadist. Hang on, everyone, just for a second. Before we get too far into this, Picasso, especially toward the end of his life, and this show, by the way, is revelatory in a lot of different ways, but you will see, shall we say, the older Picasso, the older guy, reflecting upon his life and maybe his faults and flaws, and immortality as well. And at the end of his life, for Maya, for Paloma, for Polo's daughter, who is Marina, he provided. He sat in the garden at each one of he gave everybody an estate, a huge, beautiful mansion overlooking the Mediterranean. I mean, he provided. So yes, I know what you're talking about, Picasso the Destroyer. And yet I also know from actually, you see it in the art. Look at the portraits in this show of the children. Maybe not the portraits always of the women, because there are a couple of tough ones down there of Dora Maar. There's some very sweet and beautiful ones of Olga. But the portraits of the children are really, really warm and charming. I don't think he was as bad as some people make him out to be. It's part of the legend. It's like Van Gogh's suicide. You kind of want to have that, shall we say, that darker side to him.
Well, let's talk specifically about this estate collection, these Picassos.
Yeah.
Why is this collection important?
Oh, can you imagine 4 books and so many exhibitions of my own life? And I think I know this guy. I think I know this material so well. Like I could do the PowerPoint with my eyes closed. And all of a sudden, and it's a really wonderful group of people, Park West and the Park West Foundation. You probably know all about this. Very, very important sponsorship for Monthaven. They said, come and take a look. And it was in Detroit. And I think they were having a little fun with me too, because I have my reputation to maintain as a Picasso scholar. And they said, "What do you think of this one?" And it was so different. I actually thought, I know it's a Picasso because they told me, and I researched Marina and I researched the collection. But I'm looking at this thing, and I swear, if you had covered it Or if it had been under different circumstances, I would have said, oh, what a lovely Miro. Or, hey, that looks like a great Matisse. It just did not look like a Picasso. So for an old guy like me who's written millions of words about Picasso and put the shows up, this was such a spectacular, irresistible invitation. Come and see the ones you've never, ever seen. Come and see the ones you've never even thought would be a Picasso. Come and try to figure out what this collection means sort of as a whole. And then I think I know the next question you're going to ask me is, how come we've never seen this? We've been to Barcelona, we've been to Paris, we've been to MoMA in New York, we've been to the Tate Gallery. We know the canonic Picasso. We've seen them at Sotheby's, we've seen them at Christie's, we've seen them in Gagosian, you know. Where have these things been?
Right.
And why did he... Is this your question? I'm trying to read your mind.
I'm gonna let you answer it.
And
Actually, you do sort of anticipate some of my questions. One thing about this collection that I think, or at least what Marina inherited, that's extraordinary is that it's quite a trove. I mean, it's a huge number,
gigantic,
just by itself. I mean, much more than it's hundreds of times larger than what most other artists were capable of in their entire lives. And this is just
this one collection, yeah, right.
So, and then of course it's got such a lot of variety in it. But I mean, certainly one of my questions, and I'll go ahead and just answer it now because you've sort of answered it. You know, you've written so much and studied so much about Picasso. What really surprised you when you were in here?
So many things.
Yeah, just
so many things. I mean, literally a color here that doesn't seem to be of his palette as I know it. Although this is a guy, Gertrude Stein once pulled his leg a little bit and said, "You really don't know much about color." He said, "Yeah, that's okay. When I finish with red, I pick up green." He wasn't a Matisse. He wasn't a Van Gogh, right? But some colors that I'd never expected, some forms that I'd never expected, and then these weird hybrid pictures. And I really mean strange outlier paintings and drawings that are just, they're neither cubist abstract, nor are they quite realist. They're this wonderful mingling of two things at the same time.
We're speaking with the author Charles Riley, an internationally renowned expert on Picasso. We'll be back after this important message.
The Park West Foundation reminds us that the arts help build well-rounded communities. They foster creativity, inclusivity, and cultural understanding. They bring people together through shared experiences and support for local identity. Art programs promote education, economic growth, and emotional well-being. Interested in expanding your own creative horizons? Registration for the Max Fall Art Classes is now open. Go to monthavenarts.org/classes for more information.
We're back with author and Picasso expert Charles Riley, who's here to talk with us about the Max current exhibit, The Unknown Picasso, which is on display through November 9, 2025. Let's talk a little bit about the process here because these are lithographs.
Yes.
And they're not lithographs by just anybody.
No.
So these
Brilliant man.
These are lithographs by a man who I think was pretty much Picasso's partner.
Yes.
So
Marcel Salinas.
Could you talk a little bit about
Wonderful
him?
story.
Talk about him and talk about the process of creating these works downstairs.
You've done your homework. Well done. and this, I'm really going to threaten being a complete nerd, but I love.
Oh no, please do.
I love this part of it.
This process. Actually, a lot of people want to hear this part.
Oh, there's only one person ever who co-signed a work of art with Pablo Picasso. And his name is Marcel Salinas. You will see the two signatures on a series of prints that they made together, side by side. They worked. And Salinas, it's actually a nice anecdote. I hope your listeners will enjoy it. Salinas was this devastatingly handsome, like movie star handsome painter who came from Morocco, arrived in Paris. Actually, if you look at his painting, almost what we call synthetic cubism, very colorful, very good painter. He couldn't sell a thing. He couldn't get a gallery. He was stuck in Paris, living the bohemian lifestyle in Montparnasse, but he needed a job. So he gets a job as a master chromist, CHROMIST. He's the one who's going to do the colors for the printmaker. He's the one who's going to mix the inks. And I know that sounds incredibly dull, but it's not, because you're using things like cochineal and cerulean and aquamarine and elderberry. These inks are made of precise formulas. It's almost like an alchemist. And he's side by side with Picasso, looking at the work, but also listening to the master. And let's just take the one famous color, right, from Picasso, which is blue, right? And these blues, cerulean is one, actually a lot of aquamarine. There are a lot of different blues. There's one downstairs, the blue period one. There's a wonderful green in it. So here's this guy, Salinas, and he had trouble. I love this part. He had trouble keeping his job because his boss said, "You're just too slow." I mean, in New York, it was like, "Get out of here. Step it up. Let's go." He was just so slow because he wouldn't let a print go. He wouldn't pull a print, and he would throw so many away because he needed to match the color on the drawing or the painting or the color that Picasso is standing there saying, "No, that's it, not it. True colors." You know what I mean? True colors. And if you've ever painted your house, even when you switch paints, or if you run out of white, right? If you run out of a certain white and you go back to Home Depot or something and you try to get it, but it doesn't, you roll the next thing and you think, oh no, color is so sensitive. Sometimes it's very difficult to match even something like that. Salinas matched Picasso, note by note. It would almost be like Glenn Gould and his producer, Glenn Gould and the guy in the booth who's doing the recording. He's the artist and he's the man who's bringing all of this to life. Salinas is a really, really important part of the story. And for those of us who love prints, actually, because think of photography too, the art of the print, getting ink on paper, that's a really big part of it. And I got a story, but I don't know if I don't want to bore anybody with the story.
No,
but
tell us a story.
I spent 12 years of my life writing about color, including color and music, by the way, including Wagner and Debussy, but color. And I thought I knew my color. And then I started a magazine, and I went down on press in Shepherdsville, Kentucky, and to see my magazine being printed. And especially to see the cover being printed because, I paid for it. But also I wanted to make sure that the colors matched the proper way. I had what were called match prints. So I am on press. They're gigantic Heidelberg presses. They're spitting out thousands of sheets per minute. Right? I mean, it was going. And there was this big, huge guy with a beard and his overalls. And I'm wearing a jacket and a tie from New York. And we're doing a cover. And the cover was Elizabeth Taylor. And I had just interviewed Taylor, and she has those eyes, which are kind of a violet purpley eye. And so we had this shot, and it came off the press, and it just wasn't right. And he said, "What's the matter?" And I said, "Well, the color's not what her eyes are." I had, by the way, you're a journalist, so you understand. I had to make sure the IBM blue in the ad was the IBM blue, the Hertz yellow was the Hertz yellow, Coca-Cola red, all that stuff. But I had their Pantone numbers. I had everything right, but her eyes were not right. And this big guy said, "So what's wrong? Because we're spoiling paper. We're losing paper here." And I said, her eyes were maybe a little bit more blue than that. So he's over his shoulder, and he had a spittoon. He goes, he spits first, and he goes, up cyan, 0.1, down magenta, 0.2. The next sheet that came out, nailed it. Absolutely fantastic, right? And so after the whole thing was done, I said to this gentleman, John Stovall was his name, "Hey, tell me how you knew." He said, "Well, 35 years I've been on this job. I know how to get ink on paper." And then I said, "Tell me how that works. How does it work to make a color by?" In his case, it was CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow, K is black. And it's almost, if you look at it under a loop, LOUPE loop, like this, you see a Seurat painting, you see a divisionist painting, it's dots, right? And then it composes to get the color of her eyes, to get the blue of the Picasso blue, to get the purple of the Dora Maar picture downstairs, one of the great colors. So he and I, over a little bit of Maker's Mark, because it was made right around the corner, he and I looked under a loop at some things. And I learned more about color with that guy than I had in 12 years of reading, theoretical books on color. And that's Salinas. I'm telling the story because that's what Salinas, he had ink in his blood, right? This guy really knew how to mix those inks and serve Picasso, if you want, faithfully. The true colors of Picasso are the colors that you see in these prints here at Monthaven. I mean, that's something alone that you want.
So Picasso just saw that this was complete fidelity to his own art.
Exactly. It would be like Glenn Gould in the booth saying, yeah, that's it.
Okay.
That's what I want. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Well, another music analogy, I understand that Picasso had been a phenomenal child prodigy.
Yes.
Just
you bet.
Could right out of the crib
right
practically.
Out of the, right.
Could do a perfectly brilliant realist drawing or painting of anything. Beethoven had been a piano prodigy, a music prodigy.
Sure.
But it's often said that Beethoven didn't actually really become Beethoven until about 1804, when he finally produced his Eroica Symphony, because it was at that point that music changed. And the classical world of Haydn and Mozart, that was over. And we had a whole new world, and that the rest of history has always been focused on, fascinated with. And I'm wondering, is there some equivalent period like that for Picasso? Was there a time when Picasso finally really became Picasso? Was it his blue period, his cubism? What would you think?
Blue period, but let's go back for a second. And I love the way you read music history too. Picasso was so good at the age of 7 that his father, who was a teacher of art, and his father's friends, who were just a little bit annoyed at this child prodigy, how good he was.
Right.
And then at 13, Picasso's dad, you might know this story, was working on a commission, a painting, and he said to Picasso, would you work on this part, finish it up so I can get it out of here? So Picasso, at 13, was finishing the corner of one of his father's paintings. And the famous story is this. The dad said, here are my brushes, here is my palette, be ready. I mean, Picasso went on to art school, as we know, got bored in his first semester. He was a really bad student. He ended up just walking out of there. He knew that he knew more than his bloody professors, and his professors were unbelievably, spectacularly boring artists, right? So he knew. The only other artist, I'm going back to this again, I know that story, and it was exactly at the age of 13, was Leonardo da Vinci, when Verrocchio said, here is my palette.
Yeah.
He did the corner of that beautiful Madonna, and you could see it, by the way. When you see that painting, you could see that's Leonardo becoming Leonardo. Your beautiful question is this. When did Picasso become Picasso? I would say, and there's one print here, you got to look at it. It says Pablo R. Picasso, 1898. And R stands for, do you know? Ruiz, daddy's name. His name should have been Pablo Ruiz, right? Mommy's name is Picasso. When he got to Paris, 1 year later, he drops the R. He drops the Ruiz. He starts to paint in a realist way, And of course, then it comes the Casagemas, the suicide, and the blue period. That I would submit to you, and others are free to disagree with me. That's when Picasso became Picasso. Okay. But we're not done, you see, because the other side of it, going back to your wonderful analogy, was he became Picasso with Braque. He became Picasso the Cubist. Whoa. And maybe in terms of art history, the way you were doing that with Beethoven, saying this is when music really changed, when he did that. He altered the history of art, of thought. This was modernism, not just because it was abstraction, but it was, as you just said before so eloquently, this is making us look at the world in a very, very different way. So Picasso becomes Picasso with the blue period and the rose period, but Picasso becomes Picasso with the Cubist period. And then, one of the reasons I'm here is he never sort of stopped finding a new Picasso in himself. And it became quite reflective. Many of the works here are Picasso. He's no longer in competition with, for instance, Ingres. That was one of his big things, because Ingres was this amazing realist painter. And he would look in the mirror at his own reflection and say, "Bonjour, Monsieur Ingres." He's thinking of himself. Velázquez, because when he was young, it was Velázquez. Can I paint like Velázquez? Delacroix. He was always in competition, in a sense, with the masters, because the other side of this, and I love the way you put this, Beethoven, Mozart, these guys were prodigies, but they were also virtuosi. Mm-hmm. They had technical mastery that no other did. When they did something, just think of Louis Armstrong as well. Think of Casals, think of Pelé on the soccer pitch, think of Wayne Gretzky on the ice. They could just do things that nobody else could do. They changed the medium. That was Picasso, the virtuoso. And he was the virtuoso, like, boom, right out of the gate. The Blue Period paintings are, on that virtuoso level of Raphael, of Michelangelo, of Velázquez, if you want. Velázquez would be, for Picasso, the big competition. When you get to the last ones in this show, which to me are so touching, he's only in competition with one chap, Picasso himself. He's sort of saying, how can I outdo myself?
Yeah. Well, interestingly, he obviously felt very close to a lot of these works because he couldn't part with them, could he?
Thank you very much for saying that. Because friends of mine who are in the art world will say, come on, how come we haven't seen these? Are they not good enough? Rubbish. That's not why. He kept a lot of things to himself. David Douglas Duncan told me he would give the dealer, this guy Kahnweiler especially, stuff that he thought was saleable and things that he didn't mind getting out there in the public way. He would wait and give to André Marot, who was the Minister of Culture and who did the first major Picasso retrospective as Picasso was still alive. He gave him, I guess, the ones he wanted to be sort of the quality of the Louvre, of the quality of a museum, the things that he wanted his legacy to be. So André Marot working with him, and Marot's memoirs of Picasso are essential reading if you want to get to know the man. So he said, this is the public side. This is what I want everybody to remember me by. Mm-hmm. These ones that we have here and the other ones that he kept to himself, it's not because they weren't good enough. It's because they were private. I have a lot of buddies who are artists. They will always keep something, famously Jasper Johns, right? Mm-hmm. He always keeps something to himself in his studio. Not because not even because he doesn't want people to see it, but because he needs it for reference as he moves on to the next thing that he's going to do. Or also, and this is the way I look at many of the works downstairs, as Picasso was moving from one thing to another or back and forth, especially between cubism and realism. Really, it's like a guy moving between jazz and thirds and fifths and a kind of neoclassical idiom, classical music, jazz and classical. He kept those, I think, because he didn't want people seeing him experimenting, transforming one into the other. All of these are hybrids, practically. Mm-hmm. And it's really kind of touching, right? It's like looking over the shoulder of a great artist or a writer as he's writing the manuscript, or listening to a pianist as he's trying to compose, but he doesn't want you yet to come into the hall.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the things that you've noted I thought was very fascinating, when you go and look at the collection downstairs, you see that Picasso had used his wives, his lovers, as models quite frequently.
Here we go.
And one of the things that you've mentioned is that each new love initiated a new style of painting. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that a bit. Because, if you look at the paintings of Olga Picasso versus like Dora Maar, they couldn't be more different.
Very good. Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you could maybe elaborate on it, because I'm not familiar with other artists who've, you could say, quite that same thing about.
Only Raphael, but here we go with this one, right? Because here was Olga. She was a ballet dancer, perfect model. She knows how to hold a pose.
Right.
A beautiful woman, but also ballet dancers, especially of that time, would strike a pose. And also, Olga was quite good in front of the camera. Mm-hmm. And some of Picasso's less successful works, I would say, were those where he had a photograph, and he was, instead of drawing from the person, he was drawing from the photograph. So there's Olga, and there you see her downstairs in this what we call the neoclassical style, quite realist, very fluid, very loving, very beautiful style. He really makes her look good. The one with the wristwatch, and by the way, that's a really cool print. Because the watch was something new in those days.
Right.
The boys had been wearing it in the trenches, It was a new, everything was wonderful about that print is it looks like a Roman goddess, almost in a Roman robe. And then all of a sudden you got this wristwatch. So there's Olga and Paulo, her son. They're in the show. And that's wonderfully realist. He had just been looking at actually the Farnese marbles, which are a group of Roman sculpture. And you can kind of see the round contours of it. But then here comes Marie-Thérèse, unfortunately for Olga, right? And she's the one that he met outside the Galerie Lafayette. Do you know the story? Where she comes out through the revolving door. He'd been watching her inside through the window. She comes out through the revolving door, 17 years old. And he says, "Bonjour, mademoiselle. You have an interesting face." She had this big nose and wonderful figure. I am Picasso, and I would love to draw you. I think we could do great things together. And she didn't know who he was. Isn't that great?
He's just
she had no idea.
She's just thinking, what a weird pickup line, dude.
Get this guy out of here. And then,
I've had better pickup lines than that.
And then let's just be fun for a second, but also let's talk about art. What a model. I mean, she was an athlete. She had this wonderful figure. She had the golden hair, and everything changes about the way he paints with her because he's just following his eye. And there's these beautiful sinuous curves. It's almost like looking at Titian or Velasquez, if you want. Really, really fantastic sinuous curves. Marie-Thérèse. So he's in a cafe one night, and there's this amazing woman, Yugoslavian woman. There was a Yugoslavia in those days named Dora Maar. And Dora's a photographer, by the way, a really good photographer. And she knows who he is, believe me. In fact, she's in pursuit. And she's got a knife. And it's a good thing we don't have a camera, right? Because I'm stabbing between my fingers with a pair of gloves, pink gloves, leather gloves, stabbing it and looking right at Picasso. And Picasso, whose eyes are famous, is staring right at her, across the cafe. And once in a while, she'd nick herself. There's blood on these gloves. And as she finished, she peels the gloves off, walks by Picasso's table, and drops them on his table. Like challenging him to a duel, right? And he picks them up. He's fascinated. He picks them up, and within a week, she's in his studio, photographing, actually. She made the great photographs of Guernica as it was being done. And she's a photographer and she's an artist. And that is the group of paintings we know as the Weeping Woman. So, and always this is where a lot of people think he hated women because he twists her face. He puts the eyes on different planes. He makes her grimace. It's painful sometimes to look at it. But Dora was the beginning of that style. Right, that's the style of Dora, and so we keep. I don't know how much time we have, right? Because there are quite a number of these muses, but he does change styles with every single, if you want to call them all these different women and muses. He does change styles, but there's something really different going on because the late part of Picasso's life is a whole group of paintings and drawings, the artist and his model. I mean, he's really thinking through the psychology of when I paint you. And they have a relationship, okay, so but when I paint you, what's going on between the two of us, almost psychoanalytically? That's why I think the Freud part. And then unbelievably late, then next comes Françoise Gillot, and there's a beautiful portrait downstairs of her as a sphinx. Oh wow, that's a great one.
Now she's the one who
right, and wrote the book. Okay. Then he tried to squelch the book. I don't love this about Picasso, this part. He tried to basically, completely stop that book. That was dreadful. And she gets painted, as a sphinx, but also a little bit of cubism in there, but a little something else, which is just her, because she's a really good painter. I knew her. I've seen her paintings. So in a way, he's responding to that. But then late in life, Jacqueline, whom he married after Olga was gone, and also a young woman named Sylvette, with whom he did not, he did not have a relationship. Her mom would come every single time she modeled for him. Her mom would come along, so nothing happened. And when he paints and draws her, there are a couple of them in the show, back to the way he painted Olga, back to this wonderful realism, Monsieur Ingres. They're absolutely, almost photographically precise. They're really, really pretty. She was really, really beautiful. You look at images of her. She's got the blonde hair. She's like a Mediterranean beauty. And he, for some reason, I don't think he backpedaled, right? But I think he knew, I'm going to do this one with that kind of precision that I grew up learning how to do. I think it's fascinating. I really do. Those changes of gear. Mm-hmm. You know what it might be like? Hang on, you and I could do this. I know you now. Bellini and certain sopranos. The coloratura was based upon, I'm trying to remember the names now, Patti, maybe? Give me a soprano, I'll write the aria. I'll write the coloratura aria for her voice, right? Actually, they say Mozart did the same thing. Give me a tenor. Lend me a tenor.
Or if you go back far enough in history, castrato.
So, ouch. Yeah, you're right.
Actually, you're right. Handel would do that.
And Handel, you bet. Hey, you know what? That wasn't bad. Yeah. That wasn't bad. Give me that.
Well, Farinelli, obviously.
Farinelli
had inspired any
Farinelli, right? And I think Patti, and I'm obviously something about Puccini and Caruso, if I'm not mistaken. You could look it up. Or take Balanchine, whom I admire so much. When he had a certain dancer, Suzanne Farrell, he would choreograph for her. When he then had Meryl Ashley, he would choreograph certain things for her. So, Balanchine's style would change as he had different, they called them muses too, Kelsey Kirkland. And they also said Balanchine was bad to them. But give me a different voice. Or Joseph Joachim as the violinist, and you have Brahms and Tchaikovsky writing because they know he could do that at the. It wasn't like Liszt playing his own concerti. It was the composer saying, "I will do this for her."
Well, he would try things out with Joachim. So yeah.
Yes, exactly.
I'm talking about Brahms.
I'm talking, but I would also say, because I have a little more admiration for Picasso than I think some people do, including his relationship with women. Françoise Gillot, who is was an amazing woman. She just recently passed away. I'll bet, and Dora Maar too. I'll bet they had really good conversations. Maybe not Marie-Thérèse, never known for her intellect, but those two were artists. And I think that like an interviewer and an interview subject, sometimes it could get to be pretty original and pretty interesting when one pokes the other and gets the other one, moving on to a higher plane. Also, if I may, because I'm an old teacher, when you have a graduate seminar and you're in the room with really good grad students and a teacher who's willing to shut up for a bit, you can have the possibility of original thought on a difficult subject. Why? Because one is challenging the other or saying something that the professor hadn't even thought about. And we get there because it's Socratic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're speaking with the author Charles Riley, an internationally renowned expert on Picasso. We'll be back after this important message.
The Park West Foundation is a strong supporter of arts education. The arts foster creativity, critical thinking, and emotional expression. They also enhance communication skills and cultural awareness while boosting confidence and collaboration. Students engaged in the arts often perform better academically and develop lifelong appreciation for diverse perspectives. This message was brought to you by the Park West Foundation, a champion of arts awareness and education since 2006. For more information, visit their website at parkwestfoundation.org.
We're back with author and Picasso expert Charles Riley, who's here to talk with us about the Max Current exhibit, The Unknown Picasso, which is on display through November 9, 2025. This is maybe an impossible question to answer or an unfair one, but do you have a favorite work?
Utterly unfair. That's so bad.
Because I have a certain.
Tell me yours.
I am charmed by a little girl crowned on a boat. I just find it utterly charming.
Good for you.
But at the same time, I love the Olga.
Not my choice, but it's a good one.
I love the Olga Picasso.
Yeah, those are
paintings
good
as well, because there seems to be a certain reverence in there that I'm detecting.
Agreed. And a lot of love. He was madly in love with Olga Picasso. Yeah. Partly because
I kind of sensed that.
Yeah. And she was, and all his friends said, "What?" Because she was a little on the cold side. And Picasso had a dreadful reputation in the Bohemian days.
Sure,
it was one after the other. She's also the one who said to him, "No, until I get the ring, no." So that's kind of, you could kind of feel that going on too. So he was drawing and painting.
Well, she knew her worth.
And Diaghilev, who is Russian, she's Ukrainian, by the way. Did you know that?
Yes.
Yeah. Diaghilev said, well, with a Russian girl, Ukrainian girl, you better get the ring before you consider that. I love that one too. By the way, I think that's a fantastic one. I think it's the one that is the raffle prize.
Yeah.
Which I think, lovely. There's also a black and white one down there of Olga and Picasso in a very domestic interior with a cat on the rug.
Yeah.
And it's not what I would call a monumental Picasso. It's not really that difficult, but there are lines in it, very straight lines, over the top of their heads, which go right back to 1907, 1908, 1909, when he was experimenting before he really did the Cubist paintings. I can see Picasso reflecting on Picasso in that. And then there are these lovely curvy lines. It reminds you of the guitars and the violins that were in the Cubist paintings. But then there's this fire in the fireplace. And his friends, Max Jacob especially, said, what is going on here, Picasso? You used to be a bohemian. You used to be fun. And here you are in front of a fire with a cat on the rug and your beautiful young wife, and you're reading a newspaper, this bourgeois, And he would go to black tie dinners with all the patrons of the Ballet Russe in black tie, and he had a cummerbund. And his buddies would say, "Oh, Picasso, what happened to our guy?
You sold out.
You sold out." The période de la Duchesse, they called it. His period of duchesses, when he would hang around. You know who was there, by the way? Everybody was there. Cole Porter was there. Coco Chanel was doing the costumes. It was an amazing time. Hemingway, Fitzgerald, they all knew each other. And this was Picasso.
Yeah, Arthur Rubinstein was there. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I think you're right. And Balanchine.
Well, actually, if you look at the medal that the pianists received at the Rubinstein competition, it's Rubinstein's profile that was drawn by Picasso. They were good friends.
No kidding. And Jean Cocteau was there.
They were very good friends.
I had no idea. Thank you.
And Rubinstein had basically he asked Picasso to draw him, and Picasso said, "Do you want an exact likeness?"
Linear, I imagine.
Because he was suspecting Rubinstein would just want an exact likeness, and Rubinstein said, "Just do what you want." So
what does it look like?
Yeah, well, look it up.
Look
Thank
you very much, Professor. Because he also did those wonderful portraits at that time because they were hanging around together. If you've ever watched the movie The Red Shoes, that's the Ballet Russe at that time. It was the A-team, man. It was unbelievable who was there. I told you, Chanel did the costumes. Matisse was working with them. Braque was working with them. Picasso was working with them. Dali eventually worked with them. On the literary side, Jean Cocteau was there. Right. Satie, Stravinsky.
Well, Stravinsky wrote his 3 movements for Petrushka for Rubinstein.
That's right. Oh,
specifically,
yes.
because Rubinstein had come up and said, my God, I've never heard anything like this before. And of course, everybody, if you're a composer, you want Rubinstein playing your music because you'll get money
Picasso
from that.
must have drawn him then because he did those portraits of Stravinsky, Cocteau, Diaghilev a couple of times. Olga, and all the other young ladies in the ballet. A lot of people look at them. There's one here that's very good, and it reminds them of Degas, when Degas would be backstage drawing the ballerinas as they're stretching and getting ready for the stage. But Picasso at that time was in like Flynn with all these marvelous creative minds, especially the musicians. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, one last question. I've taken a lot of your time.
Oh, too bad. I like this.
No, I've taken so much of your time, but let me ask you, what do you hope people take away from this show?
I hope, first of all, they feel like they're on more intimate terms with a great genius. Sometimes these guys are up on pedestals and they're made of marble. Also, a new appreciation, as I have had, thanks to this collection, for how big Picasso really is. It's not just one chapter in art history. How much he did do that sort of prolific side, but also it almost feels like he's endless. It almost feels as though if somebody opened a door now in some villa in Provence, that more of these might tumble out again, and you would have an even greater appreciation for this mind that, like Einstein, like Freud, like Leonardo da Vinci, like Beethoven. Actually, I love the Beethoven analogy. If I could do one more, Shakespeare.
Yeah.
You ask yourself, how could one guy who never went to college, Shakespeare, how could one guy create so many characters, so many situations, so much? How could he be such a natural? I think if you come to this, you'll say to yourself, this is endless.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Charles Riley, thank you for joining us.
Great pleasure. Right. Wish it wouldn't end.
You've been listening to Mac Talk from Mont Haven Arts and Cultural Center. Our mission is to educate, elevate, and encourage our community through the transformative power of the arts. If you're interested in transforming your creative life, check out our website at monthavenarts.org. Our guest today was Picasso expert Dr. Charles A. Riley. Our podcast music was written by Nashville composer Christina Spinay. I'm Kennedy Galpin. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.